Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, the same murder three? Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Back in 1776, someone said, "Give me coffee or give me death." And if that's how you feel, you should be at the Organic Man Coffee Trike. They make coffee the right way, one delicious cup at a time. 4501 McPherson, Suite Number 9. Coffee, the stuff dreams are made of. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the RMS Republic. I was watching TV Monday night. I had Beyond the Unknown with Don Wildman on. About halfway through, he began talking about the wreck of the RMS Republic. I had started reading up on this event back on Friday in preparation for tonight's show. This is one of those weird things that happens a lot. I've done a show on things like skyquakes. Then I'll listen to Paranormal Sideshow or Expanded Perspectives, and they'll be talking about the same thing. Last week I talked about stargates, and found out that Micah Hanks had talked about stargates just a week or so ago. A few shows later, he was talking about event horizons. This kind of thing is making me think somehow all the podcasters I listen to are connected by some unseen, unknown thought form. I did a little checking and found on several occasions as many as 5 podcasts were dealing with the same subject on different nights throughout the week or so. I don't think any of these folks are listening to each other, but I've never heard them say anything about the other shows. I listen to Expanded Perspectives, Paranormal Sideshow, Micah Hanks, all the really good, strange podcasts. They say, like minds think alike. Well, maybe we're all thinking about the same basic things at the same time. I might look into these more and see if I can't make a whole show out of it. Maybe there's something to be learned here. RMS Republic was a steam-powered ocean liner built in 1903 by Harland and Wolff in Belfast for the White Star Line. This may sound familiar to some of you. Harland and Wolff was the company that built the RMS Titanic. RMS was a ship designation for Royal Mail Ship. They delivered mail from one country to another. Anything that needed to move from Europe to the Americas or back had to go by ship. People could book passage on board a mail ship. There was a lot more involved in becoming a Royal Mail ship than just carrying mail. These ships were used to transport anything of value such as gold, silver, cash, works of art, valuables that needed to go from one side of the ocean to the other. They also had to be able to arrive in a timely manner. This is why so many of those passenger ships, Royal Mail ships, seem to go full tilt the whole time they're out in the ocean. They had a schedule to keep on. The White Star Line liked to place their valuables in a hold directly beneath the bridge. This room was called a Specie Room, but I couldn't find out what specie meant or stood for. Maybe it was special cargo, the spe and C. I don't know. I tried to find it, but none of the sites that I went to, none of the books I have say why they called it the Specie Room. In port, the room would be loaded with the valuables while under armed guard. The one and only door would be closed and locked. Then the hold right in front of the Specie Room door would be filled with cargo. Once full, the only way to get to any of the valuables was to first unload the cargo, which would require a crane and a lot of men. The opening to the cargo hold was directly below the bridge, so the ship's crew would have it under observation at all times. This was one of the many reasons being a Royal Mail ship was such a big deal. Republic was the most opulent ship afloat at the time. It was the ship the super rich sailed on to get from the United States to Europe and back again. It was decked out with all the best money could buy. There was no steerage passengers allowed on board. A steerage was the lowest class of passenger on a ship back then. It was called steerage because they were in the very bow of the ship, the part of the ship that goes up and down and back and forth the most in a storm, and, well, you're going to be seasick. Most immigrants sailed steerage. The Republic was said to be unsinkable. Does that sound familiar? It was equipped with the new Marconi wireless telegraph transmitter. This system was also known as a wireless radio. The Morse code was sent out into the air, not needing to travel along wires. Nikola Tesla actually came up with the device, but Marconi used many of Tesla's patents without bothering to get permission or pay royalties. The radio operators were employed by the Marconi Company and not by the owners of the ship that they worked on. In early morning of January 23, 1909, while sailing from New York City to Gibraltar and the Mediterranean ports with 742 passengers and crew, the RMS Republic set sail. Captain Inman Sealby was in command. The Republic entered a thick fog off the island of Nantucket, Massachusetts. Steaming ahead through a fog bank was a common practice, but you were supposed to slow way down. To ensure they didn't hit another ship, the whistle was blown on every few minutes, the big steam whistle mounted on the front mast, and the radio operator posted their position in the shipping lanes on a regular basis. At about 4 a.m., the Republic lookouts heard a ship's whistle coming from ahead. Soon, an oncoming ship was spotted bearing down on them. The bridge crew took immediate steps by having the engines put into full reverse and the helm was put full starboard, but it was too late. The Italian liner SS Florida was cutting through the fog trying to make port on time. The quicker they got to port, the quicker they could offload their passengers and turn around and head back to Italy and pick up some more passengers. The Florida hit the Republic amidships, which is like being T-boned in a car. 2 passengers on the Republic were killed in the collision. It would sound like the ship Florida was sailing out of the United States. Many foreign ship companies named their vessels after American cities or states, wanting to sound more modern and making it look as if they had connections to the New World. The SS California was a British Leyland Line steamship that is best known for its perceived inaction during the sinking of the RMS Titanic April 15, 1912, despite being the closest ship in the area. Here is something to gnaw on. The White Star Line was owned in part by J.P. Morgan. The Leyland Line was also owned in part by J.P. Morgan. He had controlling shares in both companies, so Morgan owned both ships involved in some of the controversy surrounding the sinking of the Titanic. Now that's weird. Immediately after the collision between the Republic and the Florida, the 2 ships separated to assess the damage. The Florida had the bow caved in. It was in need of repairs, but it was still afloat. Ships were designed to survive collisions like this. They had what was known as a collision bulkhead. 6 people had been killed on the Florida as it slammed into the Republic. The Republic had the side caved in and was taking on water. Captain Sealby thought the ship was able to stay afloat long enough to return to port, but didn't want to risk any of the rich passengers, so orders were given to remove all passengers. This had to be done in the dark, since the engine was dead and there was no way of lighting the passageways. Captain Sealby ordered the wireless operator to send out a distress call. A CQD is one of the first distress signals adopted for radio use. January 7, 1904, the Marconi International Marine Communication Company, now that's a mouthful, issued Circular Number 57, which specified that for the company's installations beginning February 1st, 1904, the call to be given by ships in distress or in any way requiring assistance shall be CQD. Land telegraphs had adopted the convenient use of CQ, which came from the French word sécu, short for sécurité, or security, to identify or alert any precautionary message of interest to all stations along a telegraph line. A CQ was adopted in maritime radiotelegraphy as a general call to any ship or land station. It was kind of like saying, "Hello, anybody out there?" Why land telegraph and sea telegraph couldn't use the same terms? Beyond me. In landline use, there was no general emergency signal, so the Marconi Company added a D for distress. CQD. Sending D was already used internationally to indicate an urgent message. Thus, CQD was understood by wireless operators to mean, "Hey, everybody, we're in trouble." Although used worldwide by the Marconi operators, a CQD was never adopted as an international standard, since it can be easily mistaken for the mere general call of CQ when reception is poor. At the first International Telegraphy Convention held in Berlin in 1906, Germany's Nachrichten distress signal of 3 dots, 3 dashes, and 3 dots was adopted as the International Morse Code signal. SOS did not mean save our souls. The letters were chosen because they were easy to send and recognize. 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots. Very simple. Anybody should know that. Things keep changing, and so did radio communications. During World War II, ships being attacked by submarine would send out SSS as a distress call. This meant attack by submarine. If the attacking ship was a merchant raider, they would send out RRR. If the attacking ship was unknown, the radio operator would send out QQQ. Let's make life as complicated as we can. Anyone with a radio receiver would be able to hear these signals anywhere that the dots and dashes could reach. The operator would have to listen before sending so his transmissions wouldn't get mixed in with others. Lifeboats were not designed to spend any time in. The idea was if the ship needed to be abandoned, the crew would lower the lifeboats. The boats were not built strong enough to hold a lot of people while still hanging in the air. Once in the water, the boats would be rowed to the side hatch that opened part way up the side of the ship. The passengers would then be put into the boats by way of a movable stair and then taken to a nearby ship where they would be offloaded. I can't continue without going back to the Titanic. The crew of the Titanic were not familiar with the lifeboats, and Captain Smith had canceled the lifeboat drill. The lifeboats had been designed to be fully loaded before launch. The keels were reinforced so the passengers could be loaded into the boats from the lifeboat deck. What the designers didn't take into account was the passengers would have to step out over the water, which was about 70 feet down, but it was getting closer as time went by. Women in long dresses would have difficulty stepping out over a black void and getting a foot inside a rocking wooden boat, but that was the plan. This was the reason so many of the lifeboats were launched with so few passengers. The Titanic crew were lowering lifeboats with just enough people to row it around to the loading hatch. Well, the Republic was lowering its lifeboats in preparation to remove the passengers. The passengers were told to report to the main hatch where they would be able to take a movable staircase down to a waiting boat. The captain told them there was no need to rush. This was only a precaution. They could leave all of their valuables in their staterooms and collect their things once the ship was back at port. When the captain of the Florida discovered his ship was still able to float, he had his crew move back to the Republic so the passengers could be taken on board to wait for another ship to arrive and transfer them back to shore. They already had 900 immigrants packed on board, but seeing the situation, the passengers from the Republic were taken in as well. Many ships arrived to offer assistance to the Republic. These ships were told by Captain Silby that they were not allowed to put any tow cables on. He declined all offers of rescue, saying that the White Star Line had already sent some tugs out from New York to tow his ship back into shore. It is theorized that the captain didn't want anybody attaching a tow cable to his ship because the rules of salvage say these ships would be entitled to a percentage of all cargo on board the Republic, which would include some or all of the gold in the ship's hold. Anyone dragging the Republic back to shore would own the valuables that were not attached to the ship. 16 hours after the collision, the RMS Baltic arrived around sundown, and all the passengers were moved from the Florida. This time, the immigrants were told to change ships as well, since the Florida was badly damaged. The first-class passengers were to be moved first, which caused a lot of anger amongst the immigrants. Back then, your life was only worth as much as you had in the bank. When all the passengers had been moved, the Florida steamed into port looking for repairs. The Republic had been hit right in the engine room. There was no power to any of the much-needed equipment on board. The crew was unable to open the hold and remove anything of value. The only way to save the cargo was to tow the ship back to port. The Coast Guard cutter Gresham came alongside, and its crew lowered collision mats to try stemming the flow of water. A collision mat is a piece of material that was designed by a well-known cruising expert, John Neal. It's either a 3- or 4-sided mat that is lowered over the hole in the ship. The material is then pushed into the hole by the force of the water. It won't completely plug a leak, but it will slow one down. Intended for power and sailboats, it temporarily puts a patch over a hole in your hull if you collide or crash with an object. Using its 3 or 4 securing lines, the collision mat is passed under the hull until it covers the hole. Captain Selby was highly motivated to save his ship. For one thing, he was the captain, and you just don't go around losing ships and keep your job. Secondly, He had told his millionaire passengers to leave all their personal belongings in their staterooms. There was a lot of gold, silver, and plain old cash sitting in rooms all over the ship. Plus, many of the passengers had valuables like watches and jewelry that they hadn't taken with them into the lifeboats. A stateroom in a large European mansion is usually part of a suite of very grand rooms which were designed to impress. The term was most widely used in the 17th and 18th century. They were the most lavishly decorated in the house, and they contained all of the finest artwork. Staterooms were usually only found in houses of the upper echelon in aristocracy, those who were likely to entertain a head of state. They were generally to accommodate and entertain distinguished guests, especially a monarch or some royal consort or other high-ranking aristocrats and state officials, hence the name. In their original form, a set of state rooms made up a state apartment, which always included a bedroom. On board a ship, the term stateroom defined a superior first-class cabin. With the passage of time, to make the folks on board ship feel more special, the owners began referring to any private room as being a stateroom. The super-rich folks traveling on the Republic did so with a lot of gold and silver, all of which was now sitting in locked rooms all over the ship. There was a pile of cash being sent to the Mediterranean fleet. $250,000 in coins to be used to pay the sailors. The United States Navy was stationed off the coast of Italy. When a huge earthquake hit Messina, President Teddy Roosevelt pledged to help by giving $800,000 to help the people of Italy. That money came from the Navy paymaster in the Mediterranean. This was the cash that was supposed to pay the sailors. The pay had to be replaced, so the United States government put $250,000 on board the HMS Republic to transport across the Atlantic and deliver to the Navy. The ship also held $60,000 in military supplies intended for Admiral Specie of the Great White Fleet, which was stationed near Gibraltar. This was to replace the supplies that had been sent to Italy. Just the Navy pay would be worth $250 million in today's currency. Then there was the gold secured in the hold en route to either France in order to pay back a debt to the Russia's Tsar Nicholas II, or more than likely it was going straight to Russia. At the time, Russia was confronting the threat of the Bolshevik-led revolution after the failed war with Japan. This loan was in the amount of $3 million in gold double eagle coins. Almost sounds like Dr. Evil. $3 million. Today, these coins alone would be worth $1 billion. That's a billion with a B. This information came about shortly after the sinking of the Republic. A story hit the papers saying there had been a loan made of $3 million enacted by an unknown bank to the tune of 1.5% interest. This was way below the interest rate at any financial institute anywhere on the planet. Just days before the loan went through, Grigory Wilenkin had arrived in New York on his way to Japan. Wilenkin was the financial agent to Nicholas II, who was in dire straits having just ended the Russian-Japanese War at a cost of $150 million. It was in unsecured loans and war bonds. An untold number of lives had been lost. Nicholas was now being pressured to repay all of his creditors. Wilenkin was on his way to Japan from Russia. I guess he wanted to take the long way there. He would have had to travel by way of steamship since the Trans-Siberian Railroad wasn't completed until 1916. The ship would have to go around the African continent and up through the Indian Ocean. To get from Moscow to New York, you have to travel an additional 4,680 miles, followed by a return crossing of the Atlantic, as well as the trip around the African continent, the Indian Ocean, and all that to reach Tokyo. Now, he could have tried getting to Japan by traveling the roads and trails from one end of Russia to the other, which probably would have taken just as long, and it would not have been nearly as comfortable. Wilenkin arrived in New York. He stayed for a few days, and he left the day after the Republic set sail. The ship he was on would have become aware of the tragedy involving the Republic. I wonder how that went. The Republic was now dead in the water and still sinking. The collision mats didn't work. Water was still pouring in. The White Star tugs arrived and they placed tow cables on the ship and they tried pulling it into port. As they were slowly getting up to speed, the Republic began taking on more water, making the effort to tow it that much worse. Captain Sealby was now the only person on board the Republic. He stayed on despite the risks. Some questioned his decision. Why would he stay on a ship that had no crew and no power? Well, as long as the captain was on the ship, he was still in charge, and nobody could try making a salvage claim should the tow cable snap and the ship start to drift. I'm going to make a quick shout out for some of my friends who have businesses. Give them a little business out. If you hear a bump in the night and you think you might have unwanted guests, contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society. They do a lot more than just ghost hunts. You can reach them at laredoparanormal@hotmail.com. If you have to hold things out at arm's length to see them, you might want to get your eyes checked. Check out Optica del Norte at 107 Calle del Norte, right across from the Embassy Suites. Now, how about taking a little better care of your skin? Contact Lourdes James at 956-723-3019 and get a free skincare class. And now back to the show. Hopefully some of my friends are benefiting from these commercials. I've never heard anybody come forward and say they were motivated to go buy a gallon of coffee because they heard me on the show, but you never know. The watertight bulkhead lasted until the next day when they gave in to the pressure. Captain Sealby was on the bridge when he felt the sudden change in the attitude of his vessel. He said it felt as if the hull had suddenly broken open and water was rushing in. The Republic sank stern first. The captain had to climb the main mast as the ship went under. He managed to stay afloat just long enough for one of the tugs to come alongside and lift him out of the water. The Republic sank 50 miles south of Nantucket Island. The required legal inquiry concerning Republic's loss was never held. The lack of public scrutiny of the events surrounding her loss directly participated White Star Line's 1912 Titanic disaster. At the time of the Republic's loss, the newspapers had raised serious questions regarding a ship's speed under adverse conditions, bulkhead construction, wireless telegraphy. At the time, ships would turn off their wireless equipment at night. The papers also raised questions about the adequacy of lifeboats and life-saving equipment. Had these questions been addressed in 1909, there might have been a different outcome to the Titanic's 1912 voyage. Why no inquest, you might ask? A lot of people wanted to know the same thing. For unknown reasons, Captain Sealby lost his captain's license and as a result of losing the Republic. I find this odd since the Florida hit him, not vice versa. Could there have been some hard feelings back home in England with the owners of the Republic and the loss of all that gold? Martin Gerard Bayerle was born April 23, 1951, in Queens, New York. His father, Gerard, was a lawyer and a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve. His mother, Ruth, was a German immigrant who came to the United States following World War II. They separated while Martin was still young. He lost sight in his left eye from a small explosive accident when he was 11 years old. He was into exploring the world around him. On many occasions, he would leave home in the morning to wander around New York, seeing what was out there. While at the World's Fair, he became fascinated by fireworks. This led to him trying to hand-make his own pyrotechnics. Not really understanding what he was messing with, Martin set off a small homemade bomb that took out his left eye. Some said he was trying to draw attention to his life, wanting his parents to get back together. More than likely, he was playing with things he shouldn't have. Martin first began scuba diving off the coast of New Jersey and New York at the age of 15. He went on to graduate from Abraham Lincoln High School in February 1969. Martin attended Brooklyn College in New York from 1969 through 72, where he majored in geology. He taught scuba diving as a student and an adjunct professor with the Adult Education Department. 1972, he opened a dive shop named the Brooklyn Divers Supply Corps. He began running dive operations to local shipwrecks, such as the Mistletoe, the Black Warrior, the USS Turner, the Oregon, and the U-853 submarine. He trained about 1,200 people how to scuba dive and became a master PADI scuba instructor in 1975. A PADI stands for Professional Association of Diving Instructors. Brooklyn Divers was operating successfully until 1978, when the company's source of supply and advertising were both abruptly cut off. Martin sued 8 scuba companies for price-fixing conspiracy under the Sherman Act, and when the case went to federal court, Martin Bayerle was awarded a 6-figure settlement. Martin then closed his Brooklyn operation and moved to Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. There he obtained his captain's license, a pilot's license, and he established Martha's Vineyard Scuba Headquarters, Inc., which he called Mavis for short. Not to be mistaken for Mavis Dracula from that movie. To serve as a base of operations to attempt to locate the fabled shipwreck of the RMS Republic. The Republic had been the largest ship to sink in history when she went down off the East Coast. The stories of gold and silver on the ship fueled his investigations. Most of any good treasure hunt is research. Long hours looking over records and charts to see if you can come up with a workable location to search so you don't just wander back and forth. Martin was well aware of most shipwrecks in the area around his base of operations. Knowing the Republic sank somewhere in the vicinity was one thing. Knowing the approximate location so you can hopefully find it is another. Mavis spent over 2 years on land in order to track down the best possible place the ship could be found. In 1909, as the Republic was vanishing from sight, the Coast Guard logged the location on a chart so they would know where the ship had gone down. The ability to salvage a ship was nil at that time, and no one was thinking maybe in 20 or 50 years somebody will invent a way to go down there 270 feet below the surface and get rich. It wasn't like they used a GPS or anything. The ship sank, and Nantucket Island was north from them, and Martha's Vineyard was northwest. There's a lot of ocean out there. Not having side-scanning sonar or any of the toys used by shipwreck hunters today, Mavis had to know what small part of the Atlantic was best to dive on in order to actually find a shipwreck that had been sitting on the bottom for 70 years. If a person can figure out where the Republic was sitting, somebody else might figure it out as well. You would only let your closest associates know what you found. Once you have the general area you want to search, you have to get the equipment and the personnel together to do the work. The bigger the salvage operation, the bigger the cost. Working offshore at a depth of 270 feet was going to be expensive. Captain Bayerle went looking for investors. He needed large sums of money in order to go looking for even larger sums of money. Martin also had to acquire the salvage rights to the wreck, kind of like staking a claim on a gold find. Mavis bought a bankrupt offshore oil company from Canada, Wolf Sub-Ocean Limited. They also bought a diving support vehicle named the Oil Endeavor, which they renamed the Specie Inspector. I don't know what Specie meant. Some diving term, probably. In 1972, 18-year-old Susan Young had been a student at West Virginia Business College. As she was crowned Miss Harrison County and subsequently went on to be named runner-up in the Miss West Virginia pageant. As all the diving and exploring was going on, Martin married Susan Young. They had 2 kids, Tessa and Grant. In the summer of 1987, Captain Bayerle and his company moved their operations out to the wreck site. As they sent down equipment looking for the wreck, the press began to take notice. TV companies began showing up and interviewing Captain Bayerle. He was featured in magazines as well. The salvage operation and treasure hunt became an international spectacle. Once the Republic was found, the press interest became intense. Everybody was talking about the wreck and the huge piles of gold on board. All of this attention began to draw in people who wanted all the glory without any of the effort or the sweat. Captain Bayerle was able to secure the salvage rights to the Republic since he was the one that found it. Captain Bayerle had a marine architect working with him. The architect had a set of blueprints for the Republic. As they looked over the prints, Martin began to notice these plans were not the blueprints used to build the ship. They were plans drawn up by interviewing the passengers of the Republic once the ship had gone down. These plans showed where the staterooms were and the dining hall, all the things the passengers were allowed to use or visit while on board ship. The plans did not show where the cargo was stored. There were no diagrams of any parts of the ship the passengers hadn't visited. Not having the plans to the ship, the salvagers had to guess where the gold would be stored. They managed to open a locker only to find it filled with bottles of wine. Hundreds of bottles of rare wine from the late 1800s. Very expensive wine and champagne, but not worth billions. Some experts said that the wine might fetch as much as $4,000 a bottle, while others said the wine would be contaminated by seawater and worth nothing but as a curiosity. Captain Bayerle decided to try asking someone, anyone, for a set of plans for the Republic dated from 1903, when the ship was being built. He flew to England, where he appeared on BBC asking anyone with a set of plans to please send them to Mavis, and they would be given a £25,000 reward. That would have been $33,000 in U.S., or over $75,000 today. Even after the reward had been out there for years, nobody came up with a set of blueprints for the RMS Republic. The Harland and Wolff Yard in Queen's Island was heavily bombed by the Luftwaffe in April and May of 1941, causing considerable damage to the shipbuilding facilities and destroying the aircraft factory. It is said that the plans were destroyed during an air raid, or maybe not. During their dives on the Republic, the Mavis crew brought up items found around the wreck. Plates and glasses, silverware, anything that could be associated with the ship sitting on the bottom of the ocean. These items were all collected and then sold at auction to help pay some of the bills piling up back at the office. The folks who had invested in the salvage operation, to the tune of $2 million, wanted to get something back. The companies that sold them goods needed to be paid as well. The divers who were working every day needed money to live on. Captain Bayerle sold his home in Martha's Vineyard to keep the company operating. He then took all of his and Susan's savings to keep looking for the gold. Soon he was completely out of money, and his wife was not happy with him. His treasure hunt was becoming an obsession. It was more important than his family. Following the salvage attempt in 1987, the joint venture disbanded. Martin moved to Clarksburg, West Virginia, to live with his in-laws, the Youngs, on a small farm. He finished his undergraduate education, earning a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Science Business Administration degrees from Fairmont State College, and he went on to start his MBA in Education from West Virginia University. He was accepted into West Virginia University College of Law in the fall of 1990, but would not complete his legal education there. Like a lot of our best-laid plans, things came up to sideline Captain Bayerle in his quest. Martin was having problems at home. He and his wife Susan had separated. The kids went with her. Susan, while still living with her parents, began seeing somebody that Martin considered to be a rotten creep. Stefano Robato, that's his name, Robato. Stefano Robato, sounds like a song. Stefano Robato was from Library, Pennsylvania. While Robato was pursuing Susan, he and Martin had a few phone calls, which Martin recorded. In them, Robato sounded as if he was going after Susan to get money from Martin. Martin offered him $5,000 to stay away from his wife and family. Robato said he wanted $10,000 plus $500 a week from then on. Sounds like true love. Give me the money and I'll leave your wife alone. Stefano would give threatening-sounding answers. With each conversation, Bayerle became more convinced Robato was a threat to his family. On April 6, 1991, Bayerle went to confront Robato at his former in-law's home. During the encounter, an argument broke out. Bayerle pulled a pistol and shot 38-year-old Stefano Robato 6 times. The self-proclaimed lover of his alienated wife Susan was dead before he hit the ground. Martin argued he was protecting his family, although a legal and justifiable homicide defense of self or defense of family was not offered to the jury as an option. Evidence of sexual exploitation of Bayerle's wife and children by the deceased was presented at trial. After a 6-week trial, the jury vacillated between involuntary, which was a misdemeanor, and voluntary manslaughter. They eventually found Captain Bayerle guilty of voluntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 1 to 5 years in state prison. He managed to complete his sentence with good time in 2.5 years. Upon his release, Captain Bayerle continued school in Morgantown, West Virginia, to complete his MBA in education in order to add credibility and depth to his research. There he started up an internet service provider business that he ran for 5 years, and he established IDEA, the International Development and Exchange Association. Captain Bayerle moved back to Manhattan, New York, in 2002 and continued his research into the gold cargo aboard the Republic. From that research, he refined a trademark third theory that identified the $3 million 1909 value secret transaction on board that was being shipped to Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. People had been following Captain Bayerle and his crew's activities on the bottom of the ocean since the wreck of the Republic had first been found. With so much treasure to be had, some folks decided they should get in on the action. Folks like our own government, insurance companies, anybody that thought they had a possibility of snagging part or all of the billion-dollar wreck tried to get their hands on the salvage rights. Captain Bayerle and his company, Martha's Vineyard Scuba Headquarters, Inc., wound up in court. After a long and nasty court battle, the judge finally ruled. Judge Nancy Gartner of the United States District Court, District of Massachusetts, in 2005 opinion, granted exclusive salvage rights of the Republic to the Mavis Company. Mavis subsequently acquired legal title to the RMS Republic shipwreck and her contents in August 2011, with the U.S. District Court of Boston also barring all future claims. Captain Bayerle and his men were referred to as being modern-day pirates, but in a complimentary way. I don't know how that works out, but maybe it's because that patch he wears over his eye. Martin Bayerle now owns his very own ship, all but a very wet one. Captain Bayerle subsequently started an archival research company specializing in retrieving records from government archives. After acquiring ownership of the Republic, August 1st, 2013, Bayerle published the bulk of his significant research in The Mystery of the RMS Republic by releasing a book titled The Tsar's Treasure. The Tsar's Treasure. The Sunken White Star Liner with Billion-Dollar Secret, which is available from Amazon. I'm going to have to get a copy and read it. In 2013, Mavis retained Elliott Blank Consulting Limited to manage investments and media properties relating to the RMS Republic recovery. Investment opportunities were made available to accredited investors through Lords of Fortune LLC. If you saw the TV show, you'll have noticed that Martin and his son were always wearing these black polo shirts with Lords of Fortune on the front. That's where they got the shirts. Captain Bayerle's personal life was also the subject of non-fiction book series, with the first book of the trilogy planned for release in mid-2018, but I couldn't find a copy anywhere. I don't know if the book was never released or if it was only released in a limited number, but I can't find a copy. There had also been plans to adopt the series into a feature film, but I've never heard of the movie ever coming out either. In 2015, the History Channel began a series called The $1 Billion Wreck. It was the story of Captain Bayerle, who, along with his son Grant and a crew of divers and marine salvage experts, were trying to bring up gold from the RMS Republic. The ship had been on the bottom of the ocean for 106 years by this time. The superstructure had decayed into a mess of rusting metal that hardly even looked like a ship. Fishing vessels had snagged the nets on what is left of the boat. The Republic is slowly turning into nothing but a pile of rust. Captain Bayerle managed to talk to a man who was familiar with how the White Star Line configured all of the Royal Mail ships. The layout was almost always the same, with the valuables being secured immediately below the leading edge of the bridge. This gave Mavis a much better idea on where to find the hold where the gold is stored. The diver has to dress for extreme cold at the bottom of the ocean. This makes working very hard because of the bulky suit. The descent is made using a mechanism that kind of looks like an elevator. The diver is attached to a mechanism by an umbilical cord that feeds oxygen and allows him to communicate with the surface. The cord is only so long, making it hard to get inside the wreck. And the diver has to be very careful with that cord, because if he cuts it in half, well, that's the end of his life. The diver only gets to work for 30 minutes before having to start back up. The trip up is a lot longer because the elevator stops every so often for decompression. The body has to push all the nitrogen back into the bloodstream and allow it to enlarge without causing bubbles. Diving can be dangerous activity. Diving on a wreck can be downright deadly. July 25, 1956, the Andrea Doria entered the heavily trafficked sea lanes off the northeast coast of the United States. The same day, the 524-foot Swedish passenger liner Stockholm departed New York on a voyage to its home port of Gothenburg. Around 10:30 p.m., the two ships were approaching one another from opposite directions off Nantucket. Neither was following the established rules of the road for ocean travel. Despite sailing in heavy fog, Captain Kalamai had ordered only a minor reduction in speed so he could stay on schedule for an early morning arrival in New York. Stockholm, meanwhile, was steaming north outside the recommended eastbound route in hopes of shaving off a little time on his journey. Around 10:45, Kalamai radar picked up a blip representing the Stockholm. The Swedish vessel, under the watch of Third Officer Johan Ernst Kostens Johansson, do they have to give every single name? Spotted the Doria on its own radar a few minutes later. It was a situation both had encountered countless times, yet on this occasion the two ships somehow came to opposite conclusions about one another's location. Karstens plotted the Doria to his left and prepared to pass port to port, while Kalamai fixed Stockholm's location to his right, maneuvering for a more unconventional starboard-to-starboard passage. One of the men, and it's still not too certain who, had misread his radar and inadvertently steered his ship towards the other. Just like the collision between the Republic and the Florida, the Stockholm T-boned the Andrea Doria. The collision was close to where the same event had happened back in 1909. The Andrea Doria sank to the bottom, coming to rest 240 feet below the waves. 51 people died in the collision and sinking. Since that date, 18 divers have died while exploring the Andrea Doria. No one has died while diving on the Republic. One diver should be dead. No one has ever survived decompressing like he did. While attempting salvage operations, one of the Mavis crew had a sudden breathing problem. His air was gone. His only recourse was to head to the surface as fast as he could or die. There was no decompression on the way up. When diving below 60 feet, nitrogen gas, which is about 78% of what we breathe at sea level, becomes compressed and will leak out from your blood into the surrounding tissue. As a diver returns to the surface, these bubbles begin to expand, which is not only very painful, that's why they call it the bends, it bends you over in pain, but it is deadly. The diver from Mavis surfaced way too fast, and he was screaming as they pulled him from the water. He was hustled into a decompression chamber on board the salvage vessel, and the atmosphere was increased to make his body think he was back down under the water. This compressed the nitrogen bubbles. It took 48 hours in decompression chamber before the diver was released so he could be seen by a doctor on shore. No one has ever survived that much of a pressure change in that short of a time frame. Oh, my countdown has stopped. There. Thump, thump, thump. I don't know why that thing makes so much noise. Just like on the Curse of Oak Island, just when it looks like they'll find the treasure, the season came to an end. The History Channel announced they would be airing Season 2 of the $1 Billion Wreck. They put out names and dates to watch for. Then nothing happened. I don't know if Captain Bayerle upset somebody in Hollywood or the ratings just weren't there. A lot of really good shows get canceled because somebody decides to put something else on instead. Mavis was preparing for a major recovery operation of the wreck planned for the summer seasons of 2018 through 2021. I imagine the Black Plague of 2020 probably shut down some, if not all, of their plans. Questions about the RMS Republic are many. Why was there no manifest of the ship's cargo? Nowhere on shore, in either the United States or in England, is there a list of the stuff placed on board the ship to go from New York to England. There's no record of the cargo. Why was there no inquest after the ship sank? What happened to the blueprints? The White Star Line still has plans for every major ship they ever owned. The RMS Republic is the only set of plans unaccounted for. Too many questions without any answers. Could it be somebody at Harland and Wolff, or maybe at the White Star Line, said, "There's $3 million in gold sitting on the bottom of the ocean. We don't possibly want anybody to ever get their hands on it. Destroy the plans." That's just speculation on my part, but you never know. I am currently working on a book. I'm just going to call it Paranormal. I changed the name twice now. If you have a true story that involves ghosts, UFOs, or monsters, send it to me and I'll see about getting it in print. The story must be your own, or that of a close friend or relative. Nothing you saw on TV or heard on the radio. Send your stories to strangethings@arcanasa.com. That's ARCANASA.com. Hopefully, sometime in the near future, somebody, hopefully Captain Bayerle, is going to be able to get inside the Republic and salvage that gold. I'm afraid it's going to turn out to be something like the Curse of Oak Island, where they just keep digging and never come up with the treasure. If Captain Bayerle does pass away, I don't know if his son will inherit the salvage rights, or if the salvage rights will go back to whoever finds the ship again. That's unclear at this time, and I wonder if the History Channel is ever going to put Season 2 and maybe Season 3 back on. I find it a fascinating subject. Till next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder 3. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.